from the beautiful metaverse, more specifically, beautiful Danville, Illinois. Um, Currently buried under ice, slowly coming out. Um, this is Midday with Reverend Don. I hope you're having a lovely day, and thank you for spending your midday with me. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your comments or questions onto whatever platform you're watching on. They'll show up here in my chat room, and we can talk directly. Today, my topic is drama. Not personal drama, but religious drama. Things like mystery plays. I wanted to talk a little bit about where the dramatic arts have their origin, their long-term connection to religion and spirituality, and their role in this today. I'm not quite sure why I decided to talk about this today, but I thought it would be a good subject. But first, let me take a moment to mention the Witchy Awards, which you can find at modernwitch.com / Witchcraft and Occult Media Awards. And this is the voting place for the Witchy Awards, which acknowledge creators of pagan media. And hello to Janet in the chat room. It's good to see you, Janet. And if you haven't already voted, I hope that you will go and vote and choose your favorite creators and give them recognition for what they do. And of course, I won't deny that I would be happy if we were among your favorite creators. We're up for 2 awards, one for Best Vidcast / Vlog for Magic TV, and one for Best Movie for Journey to the Parliament. And if you like what we do here at Pagan World TV / Magic TV, please consider voting for us. And if you've seen Journey to the Parliament and you enjoyed it, consider voting for that. And if you haven't seen it, take a little time to watch it. And hello to Mary Cavalcante in the chat room. Hello to Melanie in the chat room. Good to see you both. I believe that we're right at the very end of voting for those awards. So if you want to do that, I would do it soon. And I've said before, this is one of the ways you can show the creators whose work you like that their work is relevant and that it is having an effect in the world. Now, going back to drama, I think most people do know that, at least in the Western world, the origins of drama come out of ancient religion. I believe we could say this for the whole world, but it's perhaps a little more documented in sources our audience would have, how it developed out of the Dionysian mysteries of the Greeks, our modern concept of drama. However, we have records of religious-themed drama going back far earlier than that. We have it from Egypt, we have it from Mesopotamia, and that's as early as there are records. But, you know, if we look at things that are still present in animistic or shamanistic societies, we can see that the origins of this go far farther back than that. It has been a natural human thing to create dramatic representations of the things we believe in for a very, very long time. It's been part of who we are. Again, out of the Dionysiac mysteries of the Greeks, the modern dramatic theater evolved. And in some other parts of the world, I'm sure it evolved in slightly different ways, but still out of that original religious context. And that has become something very different from religious theater. But even, well, anywhere in the world, we still see religious mystery plays way down through what we would call the Middle Ages, for example. And in some cases, even in mainstream religions, up to the present day. In modern paganism, religious drama is very important. It's more important in certain branches than others. If you belong to the Fellowship of Isis, for example, I believe the entirety of the liturgy is in the form of mystery plays, in which the theology and mythology is acted out to be seen in a 3-dimensional form. And this is used as a way of, 1, recounting the legends for people, and 2, making commentary on them, making explanation of them. Um, and it's quite fascinating to watch. When Lady Olivia created the Icean liturgy, she was extremely wide-ranging. And she and her brother Derry were both very wide-ranging scholars on the subject of religion. And hello to Sir Ebony in the chat room. And it's wonderful to see you. And Sir Ebony says, just passing through to say hi and send my love on my way to class. Thank you, Sir Ebony. Really enjoy these midday chats. I'm so glad you do. I'm so glad to have so many people who join us for this. It is very gratifying. But again, in the Fellowship of Isis, these mystery plays are very, very important. They're part of larger rituals with various purposes, but it's one of the main ways of stating the Icean view of spirituality. If you look at many branches of Wicca, you will find a certain amount of mystery plays. One of the most common being on the subject of the Oak and Holly King and the change of the seasons. It's usually not near as elaborate as an Icean mystery play, but you will often see this battle acted out to be seen by people representing those deities. And this is an example of what a mystery play is. You find mystery plays in many different religions around the world, and they always, in the end, are the same thing. They are that enacting of the legend. And part of how we moved from drama as a religious technique to drama being in its own right is that it also frequently dealt with the legends of the cultures. And this in time became a separate creative route. So for example, if you look at classic Hindu drama, they are basically mystery plays dealing with the interaction of gods and people. Sometimes gods and other gods, commonly gods and people. Very beautiful, often probably the most elaborate of all mystery plays that I know of. If you look at Chinese theater, you will see a lot of the same thing. In the Western world, theatrical competition began as a way of honoring the god Dionysus. And the name tragedy, which referred to serious plays, comes out of the cult of Dionysus is a reference to the idea of the sacred goat, which was one of his theogonies. And I don't think anyone questions that as the origin of contemporary Western drama, but it existed for a long time as a religious expression. And Greek theater, both before and after the change from primarily religious focus, was known for a couple of lead players and then a chorus that stated the main themes being dealt with and reactions to those themes. If you have not seen Greek theater, it's well worth seeing. There are many people who are still performing the ancient plays today, and it's a very ritualized way of doing a dramatic presentation. Commonly involved masks for many of the characters, which you'll find in an awful lot of religious mystery play traditions, that the actors were masked not just to help them create a character separate from themselves, but to help them to drop out of it and be, for want of a better way to put it, inspired by the character they were representing. And in some traditions, it was felt that they would become that character. And you know, this is very much along the lines of modern method acting as well, where actors do feel that they try to become their character while they're playing it. And this is actually quite an ancient thought. And hello to Judy in the chat room. It's good to see you, Judy. So, having talked a little bit about the origins of theatrical drama, what about its present? Is this something that is useful in the modern pagan world? And I think certainly it is. Um, I think that people love dramatic presentation, and I think that giving something a three-dimensional expression is beneficial to help people to understand it. It's very important to understand that there's always more than one way to look at a thing. But having said that, to give it that three-dimensional human form, I think helps to make it more understandable for many people. The rites of Eleusis are one of the ancient rituals focusing on the idea of a mystery play, most widely reenacted today, with the Aquarian Tabernacle Church having probably the most prominent version. And that, of course, is the story of Hades and Persephone and the origin of the seasons. And depending on the version that's being dealt with, it can also have a lot to do with subjects of life, death, and reincarnation. This was a very important mystery play in the ancient world. It's a very important mystery play in the modern world. In the ATC, the people who are enacting this play do very much feel that they are inhabited by the deities that they are portraying, that they are inspired um, by those energies as they go forward. Some other places may feel differently. You would have to talk to them. The Fellowship of Isis also has a version of this. Um, and there are many others. And it's not just function of modern pagan community, but it was a big thing in the 19th century in certain groups as well. It is something that certainly was not forgotten in history. And it's a good example, I think, of looking at how differently the same material can be viewed and why that's important. So let us look at the story of Hades and Persephone for a moment, and different ways that people have looked at this. One of the things I remember uh, very strongly about doing this with the Fellowship of Isis, when the Fellowship of Isis did this particular mystery play, it was a huge production, beautifully choreographed, beautifully performed. And hello to Bradley um, in the chat room. And Bradley says, "You're seriously talking about the occult. I'm not mocking." Yes, we are. Absolutely. That's exactly what we're about here. The occult and also the modern, I guess we'd say occult community, magical community, modern pagan community. But with the Fellowship of Isis, it was very memorable doing that play. Among other things, it became very clear to us at the Lyceum of Eleusis in Chicago, who was sponsoring the play, how much those mystery plays manifested in the lives of the people who were portraying them. That year really made it very clear that we needed to be very careful what plays we chose because their energies would manifest in our lives. Um, but one of the interesting things that happened was that Lady Dina had a distinct idea of the role of Persephone and her relationship to Hades. And that was basically that she was in his spell, had been taken from her mother, and that she should be portrayed in a rather zombie-like fashion, that she was under an enchantment. Lady Olivia, who of course created the mystery play and came in to see it at the last moment, the night before said, "Oh, no, 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 no. That's not what this is about at all. This is a love story," and totally reorganized everything. A very, very wonderful memory. And something important to realize if you're arranging public rituals and so forth, something's always going to change at the last minute. You must be prepared for it. Usually not quite this strong. But as it happens, the actress who'd been, or the priestess who was portraying Persephone agreed with this interpretation and had all along, so it wasn't too big an adjustment. But Olivia's take on this was that Persephone was completely um, involved in her exit to the underworld, that she wanted a romance with Hades, and that this was basically her growing up, and her mother had difficulty handling it. That's one way of looking at this story, and that was very much how Olivia saw it and wanted it portrayed. It was a coming of age for Persephone. In other versions, I have seen the more common interpretation that Hades took Persephone with no warning and no desire on her part to go to the land of the dead, but won her over time. And one of the things that is often cited is that she took compassion on the spirits in the land of the dead and wanted to make a better land of the dead and found her purpose there. And it's often been suggested in some versions of the story that while Persephone enjoyed being the goddess of flowers and spring, it really was not fulfilling to her nearly as much as being the queen of the dead, and that she revolutionized the afterlife. This is another very interesting way of looking at this story. And then, of course, there are people who look at it in the very literal sense of Persephone being taken against her will and being angry about this, which is another way of looking at it. And all of these different ways are just different ways of looking at the same thing, because the entire thing is an allegory for death. Hades is death. How do we feel about dying? Is it the next stage in our growth? Is it something we resist with all our might? Do we resent it? Do we embrace it? All of those different attitudes come to this story, because that is what Persephone is experiencing. And when she returns to the world, this is a metaphor of reincarnation. Um, it is much more than just a dramatic presentation. It is a very deep philosophical comment on the teachings of those religions that venerate this story. And that's what mystery plays are. They're not simple. They're not just what's on the surface. And they can come at what you think is mythology you know really well from an attitude or from a direction that you may not ever have considered. I'll give you another example, which is the story of Ishtar and Tammuz. In the Icean version, there was a very different look at this story. Normally, when people interpret the story of Ishtar and Tammuz, um, they're here in this world. The death of Tammuz is going to the afterlife, um, and eventually he is brought back to this world. In the Icean version, it is revealed during the play that they're actually talking about leaving the astral world to come into this one. That's their way of looking at this story. That Tammuz did not die out of our world um, and go into the afterlife as the only interpretation of the story, but rather died from the astral world to come into this physical world, and eventually is freed to return to the astral world. That's an aspect I would never have thought of, and a very interesting take on the story. All of these things really have multiple takes. And I know that there are people out there who are certain that one take is the only take and are very upset when people try to look at it differently. Obviously not my point of view. I've talked many times on how the same thing is different from different perspectives. And to me, this is one of the most profound metaphysical realizations you can have. And I've often referenced that example of the diamond, the one stone with many facets. And what you see depends on the facet you look at. We use this as a reference for deity, but we can look at it really as a reference for anything. What you perceive of a situation depends in part on how you're looking at it and whether you can look at it in more than one way. When you realize that the same stone has many angles and many facets, you can learn a lot more about that stone. When you realize the same situation or the same idea can be approached in different ways, can be understood in different ways, you can come to have a much better understanding of it. And we were talking, oh, so many times about shadow work, and this is true there too. When we go to do shadow work, we're working on parts of ourselves that need healing and integration. Here too, there may be multiple ways of looking at the same thing. There are certainly multiple ways of doing it. You can approach shadow work in very intellectual ways, where you know everything that you're working to heal and try to understand all the issues involved in it. You can approach it purely energetically, dealing with only the energetic aspects of it and still be successful and never even know what you've dealt with, because you've come at it from a different angle. This is, again, true of everything. So I highly recommend when you come to metaphysics and also when you come to life, keep your brain as flexible as you can. A rigid brain is your worst enemy to actual understanding of these situations. It can be helpful when you're working on your reaction to situations, but if you're trying to understand them, you need to remember that sometimes there's more than is visible on the surface. Sometimes there's more than one surface. And to truly understand what's happening, it's good to be able to look at it from many different angles. To me, this is one of the virtues of mystery play. In my experience, and I've seen many, many different mystery plays over the 40 odd years of my presence in the pagan community, and especially that story of Hades and Persephone. I've seen it approached from many different angles, not only in the pagan community, but in the wider community as well. If you look at the history of animated film, for example, some of the early examples of animation dealt with that story because it was very strongly emphasized in the education of the time and very much part of people's vocabulary. And it's interesting to see how they interpreted it, then put it next to our religious interpretations and the wide range of those interpretations. It's really quite fascinating to look at. Now, when we talk about mystery plays in modern practice, usually when we see them, they're part of a larger ritual. But what is their purpose? And again, part of their purpose is to provide a three-dimensional recitation of a particular piece of mythology or theology. It also is almost always an artwork in its own right. I personally have felt for a long time that our community loves artwork. It loves dramatic presentation. It loves pageantry. I see a lot of people trying very hard to be as simple as possible, and that has its place. But I find that people really love um, when certain things are made a good show of. They love the masks. They love the costumes that you would see in a ritual mystery play, for example. They love seeing um, what may be a very stylized way of representing the story. And I think that although everyone is looking for certain things that may not be the same as others, I find that there are a lot of people who like that kind of dramatic presentation. They like a little bit of pageantry. They like a little beauty, for want of a better way to put it. This is a bigger theme in some traditions than others. And you also have to be very careful when trying to come at things from that angle, that you don't allow the visual element to overwhelm the other elements. I remember a version of this story that I once did, the story of Hades and Persephone. which included puppets that were at least 10 feet tall. The visuals were stunning. But the story as presented was not. And it simply did not work. Or at least that was the attitude of many of the people who were there. They felt that it simply did not really reach them. They saw what was intended. They appreciated the artwork, but they didn't feel it quite got to them. So you have to be careful if you're the person arranging that mystery play to keep everything in balance. But this is always true with public ritual and even with private ritual. You have to keep everything in balance. One of the books that I have written, Ritual in Theory and Practice, talks about this at some length. You can find it at CorellianPublishing.com. And it talks about how important it is to make sure you're reaching the people who are there, to make sure you keep that energy high and that you keep their attention. And, when you're doing a public ritual, the worst thing you can do is drag something out to where you lose the attention of the people who need to be involved and building their energy and building the group's energy. That is the most important thing. Everything else is to help with that. This is true in many ways in mystery plays as well. You must keep the attention. And this is another thing to consider when you're approaching this kind of presentation. Now, with that, I see that we're coming down toward the end of our half hour, and I want to take a moment and remind you that tomorrow we will have Chris Copeland as our guest, the new executive director of Corellian Publishing, and we'll be talking about Corellian Publishing, its present and its future. And I think that will be a lovely show. I hope that you'll join us for that. And I'm certainly looking forward to that. And I want to thank you for joining me today and every day here on Midday with Rev Don. I love to spend this time with you. And I love to see so many people from so many places. So with that, I'm going to offer you a last word about the Witchy Awards, and then we'll close with our prayer, as we always do. Once again, I want to mention the Witchy Awards at modernwitch.com/Witchcraft and Occult Media Awards. You can see it going across under my face at this very moment, hopefully without too many misspellings. But you can never be too sure when I'm typing it. Sometimes I type quickly, but you can tell what it says. Once again, we are up for a couple of those awards. I would love it if people voted for us, and because when you're recognized in this sort of thing, it tells you that you are in fact reaching people that you do have relevance to them. So please consider going and voting there if you haven't already. And with that, let us have our prayer, and I will wish you a good day. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we ask you to help us to remain flexible in our brain, flexible in our attitudes, flexible in our lives. Help us to adapt to all those things that come to us in life, and to see things as clearly as we can, from as many angles as we can, with as great an understanding as we can. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love and thanks, and knowing that you're always with us, still from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always, and we'll see you tomorrow.